Audace, hey, how's it going?
Hi, Igor. How are you?
Good,
Hello,
good.
everyone.
Can't complain. Hey. Thanks for being on time.
No worries.
Good. Looks like we have all the speakers in the room. Arun, Serhii, if you guys can start the video, it will be super helpful so we can start on time.
Hi, Igor. Good afternoon. How are you?
Good.
Give me 1 minute, please.
Sure. All right, I think we can start. Welcome back to our second bigger portion of our today's session on leapfrogging the digital transformation in East Africa. Super excited to continue this. I hope you had a good break. I don't know, was that lunch or just a working break, but I hope that was good. And we're ready to kick off our second part with the panel discussion that's gonna last for 30 minutes. The topic will be the use of big data and IoT to increase the effectiveness of businesses. And I would like to invite on stage our moderator, Audace Niyonkuru from Digital Umuganda, as well as speakers that will be joining, accompanying him, Arun Kumar Madeswaran and Serhii Nikolaiev from Innohub. Audace, to you.
Thank you, Igor. And thank you, everyone on the panel today. So maybe you can start with just a quick round of introduction. I'll start with myself. I'm Audace Niyonkuru from Digital Umuganda, and we're an AI company working with basically speech recognition here in Rwanda, East Africa. Maybe Arun, you can go on.
Sure. It is a great pleasure to be with you all, gentlemen and ladies, today. And I have more than 16 years of experience in the IT industry. And now I'm specializing on the AI, all things AI.
Great. Thank you, Arun. And Serhii, maybe a small introduction to our participants today.
Yes, hello, everybody. So I'm Serhii. I am Chief Research Officer of Innohub. I also have a decade of experience in creating artificial intelligence products in different areas, in different natural language processing, computer vision, and working with big data. So also a very interesting panel discussion today, I think. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask in chat. Thank you,
Serhii. Maybe you can just kick off right away and dive into it since we have a short amount of time. So as Igor just said, the topic of today is the use of big data and IoT by businesses and to enable this leapfrogging that we've been talking about this whole day. So I wanted to kick off by asking Arun, how do you think businesses, especially since we're talking about Africa, how do you think businesses can leverage IoT and big data, and what's in it for them?
Right. So we have been recently seeing that there is a huge focus on AI everywhere. So you want to sell a product, you just put a label on top of it saying AI enabled. The market is going to observe that product very quickly, right? So that is the kind of trend and the human mentality on anything that they want to sell or anything that they wanted to bring into the market. They are adding a label as AI enabled. But we need to have a fundamental understanding on how we are going to enable AI. Right? So we have to understand the fundamental pillars of AI, and the most important thing of any AI-enabled product or software or services is the availability of data. So without having a data, we cannot jump into AI. So the big data, it's kind of, I would say, even though the image of the big data or Hadoop is an elephant, it has been overshadowed by AI. though it has a big image, but it has been overshadowed by the AI. So we have to have the data collected, curated, and the right set of data to start into anything that is related to AI. So a lot of people are forgetting the fact that we have been seen in a lot of cases wherein which they wanted to say that I need to add a capability to my product. But the first question that they forget to answer is, or if we ask the question, they don't have answer for that is, do we have enough historical data, or do we have enough data to go into AI mode of it? So the big data part or the data part is generally being forgotten. So all the businesses have to keep in mind that the data is the new gold or the new oil. So we have to invest more in getting proper data and curating them. And it's like storing them, not discarding them in any way. So any data is a good data. Like there is nothing called as a bad data. Only thing is, how are we going to perceive that? For what use case we are going to use it? That really matters. So organizations have to start investing in collecting data or putting the right data in place for the future. It is like kind of planting a seed for the future generations to come and reap the benefit of the tree or a fruit. So if you start a data initiative today in your organization, it's going to help you down the lane in 6 months or 1 year or 2 years to drive your organization into a greater digital transformation initiative. So to summarize, data is always forgotten or kept in the sideline. So organizations have to give importance to how to get their data or start collecting their data. I mean, it's never, some organizations might not have the practice of collecting or keeping the historical data. It's never late. So at least from this moment, they should give importance to data, never discard any portion of data. So that is the first thing. Okay, how are we going to get data? So the major catalyst in getting large volume, velocity, and variety of data is through IoT devices, right? So IoT is one of the massive data generator. Right? Let's take an example. If you're going to fill in a form of customer or a user entering into our building, it is based on the manual data entry speed, right? A person has to manually enter, collect his card, collect his details, and he has to enter the details. But if the same data comes from a sensor and a video camera, imagine the amount of data we'll be collecting for the same use case. So IoT and big data works hand in hand in complementing each other. Big data needs large volume of data. IoT collects large volume of data. So these two goes hand in hand in any use cases that the organization wants to implement in the future.
Actually, you just touched a point on data is the new gold. So I wanted to shoot the question to Serhii. Do you think data should be owned by corporation, especially data of its clients, or it should be an open resource that can be shared between, I'd say, researchers and innovators in that field?
Oh, thank you very much for this question. It's a very interesting question. So taking into account that, for example, by 2025, there will be approximately 80 zettabytes of information generated by different kind of IoT devices. It's a lot. And this will be called like Big Data 2.0. So I'm not pretty sure that one company or like one entity will be able to handle this data and say that it's mine. And from what we see from the history, so the best approach works when the data is shared. Because, for example, we have such companies and organizations like Kaggle and other places where the companies come with their data, they like anonymize it, put online, and actually this data has some value, but company cannot utilize it. And on these platforms, there are a lot of smart people that come look at this data and come up with new ideas, like new ways of using this data and give benefit to the company, which makes it work faster and more efficient. Because for now, to find like very nice team of machine learning experts, it's very, very hard. And like these competitions, they allow to get and to give much more insights for the companies and these entities who provide the data than they would be possibly got by themselves. One very interesting example was the companies that owned mines, and they had a huge number of data stored in their like storages, but they had no clue how to use it. So it's like geological data about what was underground. And all the mines were like out of resource, so they were not utilized and they were about to shut down. And they just thought, oh, okay, what do we lose? Let's put this data, like make it public. And actually a team of Russian machine learning experts that have no idea about anything related to mining just took this data, applied a lot of mathematical methods, and then said to the company, well, you have probably in this region something interesting, look at this. And actually this company became like very, very rich soon because they utilized their data and this knowledge that they had. So what I think, definitely the data that is collected, it should be public as small as possible, because analyzing this data by different entities from different perspectives and searching for different kind of value may unlock potential for this like hidden knowledge in this data. Because I would even say not the data is the new oil, but like the knowledge is the new oil what we can receive. Because if you have piles of data which you cannot utilize and you cannot use, it's like useless data. And if you get insights from it which have business value, then of course this is like new level which allows you to gain new unknown like value for your business and value chain. And I will have a talk today in a couple of hours, I think, about like digital twins. And I will also cover this topic about how sharing different kind of data between different entities up to government level may unlock additional, like a huge potential for the economic growth, for decision making, for planning and other stuff. So if, for example, the ideal future would be when all these entities that collect the data will have an API which allows us to share this data and to analyze it, it will unlock a lot of hidden values, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Serhii. You actually touched one more important point where you say knowledge is the new data, is the new oil. I mean, and I wanted to ask about skills now. We all know that there's skill scarcity, especially in emerging technologies such as machine learning and others. So I wanted to first ask Arun and then you, Serhii, what you think could be a solution to this. Is it industry collaboration as the one you just mentioned in the mining sector, or it's more academia? Does it come from academia, or will it come, for example, from upskilling? I'd say upskilling policies from government.
Right.
Arun, over to you.
That's a very good question. Actually, I should rephrase my previous statement. The data is the new crude oil. We should not say it as a real oil. As Serhii mentioned, it is in the most crude form. I mean, the major challenge of any data scientist or the machine learning engineer is he has been handed crude, right? He spends, I always used to say, the role of a data scientist has been split into two parts. One is the data scavenger. The first part, he like goes around and scavenges for data. And the second part is data janitor, where he spends most of the time cleaning the data. So with that note, I'll say the data is a new crude oil. And one important point that Serhii mentioned is about like the availability of data, right? With great data comes the great responsibility, right? When we start collecting more data, right? The more power comes into it, right? We have been seeing a lot of issues related to the availability of data, the privacy. The data privacy is a primary issue when we start collecting more data, right? Unknowingly, the data that we collect start giving some information about the individuals, right? Or the non-public private information in terms of banking, or the key identifier information in terms of other domains. So we have to be always judicial when we put in the process of the data collection. But believe me, practically all the control dams that we establish to collect the data is never kind of respected in all aspects. So we end up collecting more than what is required, and then we spend time in trying to get rid of the unwanted data that is being collected. So again, the data privacy is a major issue when we start collecting more data, and the organization needs to be a little bit, they should be respectful to the boundaries of the individuals when collecting data. And the next point I would like to highlight is when we come into the domain of sharing data, again, the issue of privacy and individual organizations domain expertise comes into picture, wherein which if I start sharing all the data an individual organization owns as a public or open data set, it kind of opens a lot of avenues, but at the same time, it challenges the individual organization's capabilities. Here, the government can play a pivotal role because the government can have the experts in place in curate the data and share those open data sets, which will be used for good. I think the Dubai government is taking a great initiative in releasing a lot of open data sets. If you go to, I think, mydata.dubai.com, you can see a lot of open data sets which can be used by individual companies or organizations in helping in building a better product based on the data. So these are the points that I would like to highlight on that question.
Serhii, what do you think?
I fully agree about like privacy and other issues, because when you start looking into data, for example, we were working with geospatial data like GPS coordinates and like different entities moving. So having like a lot of collected GPS data, for example, gives you a lot of like understanding of behavior and possibility to identify like even a certain person in this data, although you have nothing but geospatial data. So I fully agree that if we share some data, we have to understand like all the possible consequences and all the ways how we can hide like this privacy information in it. And like from the point of view of government, it would be also great to make these programs, to make these data sets available. I agree with Arun that it will really help and speed up the development of region. And about specialists, also on this side, it's very nice idea to have like grants and different programs for academia and other like grants for research organizations that they can dig into and find new values that can be used for good for all society, and also like governments, companies, etc.
Thank you, Serhii. You was actually both touched on my next question, which was around policy, and I wanted to ask if, in your opinion, Serhii and Arun, you think there are the right policies in place to build a conducive environment for basically data-related, I'd say, sciences to flourish, or if there's something that should be done to for the policies in place to reflect the environment on the ground. I would say if there are more challenges basically in the health sector, talk about data sharing. Yeah, so that's the. I'm wondering if there are policies in place to build a conducive environment for tapping into the leapfrogging we're talking right now.
Right. Again, this is still evolving, right? The whole big data and the APIs, right? The APIs, though it has been existing for many years, the data sharing, the whole idea of giving importance to data is pretty new to the industry, I would say, right? In a lot of regions, I mean, in US and in European countries, it has been like they already have a pretty established data sharing policy like GDPR and the other data sharing policies. But there is no, in my own opinion, there is not a global standard. There is not a very well established global standard yet. So it is still evolving, and maybe like we can take the best practices from multiple countries, and like individuals can establish. I mean, individual countries Instead of individual countries, if there is a global open standards for it, that will be much better. But I would say it is still evolving. What do you say, Serhii?
Yeah, I fully agree, because all the standards across different countries are different. And what we see, for example, with the example of GDPR, when it was introduced, like with this Cambridge Analytica scandals, etc., to collect and make this data as much usable by the users and manageable as possible, so any user can figure out what is going on, how can he turn off this policy, etc. So in the final end, sometimes it ended when a lot of companies just put a spoiler, you have like accept all the cookies. We have seen everywhere, for like European countries, and actually in real life, nothing, like from the user perspective, nothing really changed, but a lot of like additional issues appeared legal. But on the other hand, it forced the companies, at least in European American region, to be able to control their data, to be able to delete their data, etc. But if we look, for example, for African region and like Middle East, so there are a lot of cases when like the companies believe that their data is their data and it should be private in any end, and they don't want to share it, like leaving behind all the GDPR policy, etc. So they own this data, etc., and they don't want to share it for some reason. But if we take like historical examples again, so the first like attempt to fly between like the continents, etc., it was also sort of competition where it was established competitions that someone should try, and in the final end, like 10 times more effort was used to achieve that goal, and the goal in final end was achieved. And it actually, from the economical point of view, can be much more useful for organizations to share the data than to have it with them. Because if we are also again talking about like African region, so for now, like mobile operators have a huge power because they have like all the data and they can do a lot of it. Banks have a lot of power because they have also a lot of data. And on the other side, when we look about like people who want to become data scientists, etc. So they try to work with different data sets, but when they want to help in these regions to someone, it is almost very hard because none of these organizations would will to share their data. And these organizations also rely only explicitly on their resources they have. But if they could unlock this data and would say like different kind of regulations, and there are a lot of regulations which are very good, so they can now choose from the experience of Europe and America what is good and what is not. And it can be much more useful and better solutions than what is going on. And what I think actually the region will evolve. Some time will pass and it will evolve in this way. So we will have this APIs and possibility to share the data and possibility to have like one whole ecosystem kind of interconnected with like one digital space. So I think it will come.
Actually, so yeah, I wanted to ask you a question. You mentioned power and has been derived from the amount of data big corporations such as telecoms and banks have. Do you think it's going to be harder and harder for startups to penetrate because big corporations basically have accumulated a lot of data over the course of the years they've been operating?
It is a very interesting question on this way. So yes, for now, for startups, it's pretty hard, I think, to get into the market. But on the other hand, as I have mentioned, there are like, if we're talking about IoT devices like distributed computing, etc. So the data generators that gave new data are coming more and more with every year. And we're talking about zettabytes of the data. And in the final end, I think like it will be sort of competition where this data will be also available for other entities. And those entities will win who will be able to analyze it the most efficient way. And if we are talking about like large corporations like telecoms, etc., they also have their own R&D departments that hire people that try to like dig into some exact problems, but if it takes a global picture, the global scale, so usually it's about like human intelligence and brain to come up with new ideas and to figure out how can we analyze this data in different ways. So in the final end, I think the situation will change, and it like the new startups, when the data will be shared, will also give competitive solutions for what is going on, maybe even to those like telecom operators as well, so who have already power, or at least they think they have power because they have data. Because the main point, not just to own the data, but to get the most insights from it. And sometimes it's very, very depends on which people you have, like which talents you have, which skills these talents have. And usually like these talents, you cannot just go to the market and hire them very fast. You should grow them. And very, very often, sometimes they come up with good ideas in some startups, and they will be able to analyze this data in this way. So I think like the more people, like the more power will be. So the more
I completely agree with Serhii on it. And if I may add one more point, as I was telling, like no organization is going to be willing to share the data that they own by themselves. So this is where the governments needs to pitch in to set a standard on, okay, let's say if there is a telecom operator, or if there is a hospital chain, or a healthcare data, or if there is like a road authority. So they can set standards on what data can be shared, right? And in what standard it can be shared. In that way, at least the government can have a leverage to play with the organizations, that they have to share certain amount of data, they have to contribute certain amount of data as a part of their domain expertise to the open world. So it will help the startups to get into the data set and come up with some innovative products. And believe me, with the legacy organizations like a big telecom operator or a big banks, they always focus in their core problem. But when the new startup comes, they have a groundbreaking idea by solving one small problem. But the focus of a big banks or big organizations follow through a chain of command. And even if there is a good idea which is proposed in a big organizations, that might not reach to a level of where they can do a proof of concept and demonstrate it to the management team to get approval to build it. But it is not the case with the startups. If they work based on their hunch, right? So if the governments can encourage organizations to share more data, that will help the startup ecosystem to feed on that data and come up with more useful and innovative products.
Completely agree.
Do you think this is the main hindrance for startups, access to data, or that there are bigger hindrances such as, I'd say, skills, access to infrastructure? What do you think is hindering the adoption? I don't want to say hindering as if it's slowing down, but what do you think are the barriers for startups as well as large organizations to leverage data?
Right. I mean, even within the organization, right? I've been working in the corporate structure for more than like 16, 17 years. Even within an organization, when it comes to data sharing, there is always a hesitancy between sharing data between one group and the other group, right? So when a startup which doesn't have a play in the particular domain, it is really, really difficult for them to get data. And in the recent years, I mean, a couple of years ago, let's say if 10 years ago, there was a mobile innovation or an like a app innovation or a process innovation. Now, most of the innovations are boiling down to data-driven innovations or innovations driven by artificial intelligence. Again, it's like synonymous, right? If it is an AI-driven innovation, it cannot happen without data, right? If you're building something on IoT, you have to have a big background of data, or you will be collecting massive amount of data and you'll be processing it. So all these are like very tightly linked. So for a startup, if they want to break into any existing domain to come up with an innovative idea, I think without data, it is really difficult. So I would say one of the problems that startups are facing is not availability of enough good quality data.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you, Arun. Serhii, please go on.
Yeah, I agree about this, and also like another issue, like not only availability but also regulations that for startups sometimes force them to face up with huge corporations, and even if they have like nice idea, nice product, so sometimes they have to fight on the higher levels with huge organizations. They have like much more resources than the startups have. So I think it's like the second issue. So sometimes startups have to iterate fast, have to check the business idea, and even if it's like ready to market, so they need to have like full momentum, like enough momentum and speed to penetrate the market.
Thank you. So in closing remarks, I just wanted to ask each one of you to tell me what you think will be the recipe of the winners in this industry. Looking maybe 5-10 years from now, what do you predict the winners of the industry will have concentrated on? What do you think will be the recipes to be at the forefront of this industry?
In my opinion, the industry winners will be qualified based on like the amount of data they own, like the amount of good quality data they own. See, imagine the power and the leverage and the control that Google has over us, right? It's all because of the data that they own. So in the coming years, those who own more data, again, the government has to intervene and regularize the process. But if you see the current trend, those organizations which own more data, and because when you own data of a person, you touch the person on an individual level, right? A personalized level. So in my opinion, the organization, the winners will be the data owners.
Yeah, interesting question, very interesting question. So on my opinion, also there is very interesting idea of Germany principles, which is sort of Great Britain's digital twin, national digital twin, which will be like system on a national scale that will have all the data, will have a lot of APIs between different kind of organizations that will allow to share, and what they predict and what they want to have the system for is to have like the model of the whole society, like maybe in different little bit ways, from banking data, from like geospatial data, from IoT data, from different, all kind of IoT devices that are possible together. And actually what they predict it will give them opportunity to have like unlock 25% of potential of economy. So it will grow much faster than it's possible to grow now. And what I think, if it works, and I think it should work, in the final end, everyone will use this model where we have like one single digital space for everything, with like digitized models of buildings, of cities, of ourselves as humans, with sharing all this data between different entities. Like for now, we are more concerned about like privacy problems, but I think it's possible with the blockchain and other technologies to make trusted custodians and other systems that will be secure, distributed, and have all this data, and which unlock possibility to like have a planning. For example, if we envision some sort of state where we as a nation want to, or like as humanity, maybe as a whole planet, to become into in like 10 years, for example, and run multiple scenarios, different scenarios on this kind of huge model, how can we achieve it, and then select the most optimal way. So I think it's very nice future to envision and to try to build. And yes, like we will need the data, we will need clean data, we will need like knowledge from this data, we will need like a huge number of models which are not exist by now and which are just ideas to implement. We will use a lot of models that already are established. So it will be very interesting world, emergence of different kind of technologies, of the data we have, the data we will have, and like our desires and capabilities where we will come in the final end.
Thank you, Serhii. Thank you, Arun. A very interesting discussion today. Really looking forward to be part of those data owners They'll be the winners of tomorrow. Igor, I think I'll hand over to you for the closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Audace, Arun, Serhii, for your remarks, thoughts about using the big data and IoT to increase the effectiveness in doing any types of businesses, and sharing your trends and some thoughts and predictions. That was really insightful. Thank you so much for being with us.